Hey friends, I usually make videos later in the day, later in the night. I usually make them after midnight and it's dark. And so this is one of the rare times that I'm making a video at 6:30 p.m. So there's still sunlight coming in through the window. So the lighting should be better. It does look better, and I might try to do this more often. We'll see. And I want to do a video today about project management. So I've already done a video about project management. It's pretty long. It's 45 minutes. And yet, and so it's one of those interesting things where should you keep trying to do new and different things that you haven't covered yet, or should you follow up on things that have resonated with people? And I think both, right? So I think I have like a dual path where I would like to always be trying some new things, and I would also like to follow up and double down on the things that work. And this decision is made slightly easier by the fact that I personally care about my project management, and I feel like I'm not currently at a place where I think I'm doing super great at it. And so I want to talk out loud about it and see if it helps me out, and maybe it'll help you out, or maybe it's just fun, right? And what else? I have my YouTube channel open. I have a vertical monitor, and then I have all the timestamps on that previous video laid out. I'm not wearing my glasses, so I can't see it super clearly. I've got to squint a little bit, but yeah, I'm just gonna wing it. And let's chat a bit about what I have been doing. So I always have multiple projects going on at the same time. Wait, I think I wanted to say that I'm probably going to title this Project Management 2, which is sort of like threading it from the previous video, which I think is good indexing practice. And I will be curious to see how that plays out. So that's kind of a note for my future self. Okay, project management. I like to always have multiple projects going on at the same time. Intellectually, I don't know if that is optimal. But again, what does optimal mean, right? And what is the context? What is the framework? What is the world that you inhabit when you are deciding what is optimal? And I think there are assumptions baked into that may not necessarily be true. And for any piece, any directive, any piece of advice, or any suggestion about how to do things, you can almost always find some circumstance or context in which flipping the advice or directive makes sense. So do one thing at a time does make sense, and I can think of a lot of situations in which I would have been more effective and more successful if I had done one thing at a time. At the same time, my personality is such, my character is such, my psyche is such that I like to always be having multiple things going on at the same time. And all of the good things that have happened in my life, very often that some of the best things that happen while I'm distracted from one thing and working on another thing kind of in secret, or just kind of scurrying off to do a bit of nonsense on the side, and then that nonsense blows up. And I do think there's something about peripheral vision, like in a metaphorical sense, like when the things that I put in a throwaway amount of effort with like a throwaway amount of scrutiny, there's something about the amount of focus that's close to ideal, it seems. But all of this could be rationalization. All of this could be me trying to justify my way of being, which shouldn't require justification anyway. The way you are is the way you are. I'm pretty okay with it, with the current state of affairs. I used to be very twisted up about it, and I think I tried to run experiments when I was a teenager, and when I was like 20, 22, 24. I would try to experiment with, okay, let's just focus on one thing. And it's not binary, right? It's like each time I tried to do one of those things, I benefited from it. And I think that, so there was a period of time a few weeks ago where I was making a video every day. That was kind of my main focus. And that was a good thing to do. And I'm glad that I did it. And yeah, so there's this yin and yang, inhale, exhale kind of dynamic. Whenever I say inhale, I want to, which is a good habit anyway. Where am I going with this? I think that so I'm pretty happy with the way I manage my projects, even though I know it is, again, I keep saying it is suboptimal, but optimal in what sense? It could be optimal. It might be that when I look back on my life 30, 40 years from now, I will think that, oh, I'm damn glad that I didn't give in to the mainstream conventional wisdom that you should do one thing at a time. Like there's definitely efficiencies that I lose out on at the tactical level that I would benefit from getting better at. But the real kind of holy grail / secret sauce, like the golden goose of my essence, is that I connect things across different fields, different contexts. And I remember, I think I was scrolling through like Carl Jung's Wikipedia page at some point, and I think his Red Book took him like 16 years to write and publish. And we're just really not, as a culture, I feel that, as a culture, right, everyone, or just, I don't know if it was different back then, but the idea that somebody might be working on something for decades, I feel like that's something that I'm trying to do, that I feel like a lot of people that I admire throughout history did. And I feel like when I look around and I scroll through Twitter, which is it's my fault because well, there are reasons why I enjoy Twitter, but like it has its pros and cons, right? And one of the cons of Twitter is that it's very ephemeral and very focused on the now, which I also like that. So this is coming up as a theme in multiple things in my life recently, which is like even yesterday, Venkat, who is someone that I am very grateful for a lot of reasons, he made a thread about an advantage that formal education has over self-learning. And so that's a well framed position. He's not saying that formal education is better than self-learning. He's just saying that in this particular context / domain, here's one possible advantage that formal education has over self-education. And when I read it, I kind of agreed, but I also felt an impulse to disagree, to do a counterpoint, right? And so I did a thread that was I wasn't disagreeing with anything he said. I just kind of like, so he would say something like, this is a problem with this, and then I'm like, and here's how you could address that. It's so because I know how to address the problem that comes from that, that's no longer as much of a problem to me. So it doesn't bother me as much, right? And I'm willing to take the pros with the cons, and the cons seem less and the pros seem more, partially because of my personality. So it's and I reflect on that. It's just a throwaway incident, but because of the other things that have been on my mind recently, I've just been thinking about, so how does that apply to like project management, and how many projects should you be working on at one time, right? So right now I have my ebook, I have my word vomit project, which is, I guess that is kind of far on the back burner. I can kind of ignore it semi-indefinitely, probably for years, but it's there, right? It's on my whiteboard. I have like this one sheet of paper with like, it's working its way up to 1,000 X's, and I'm at like 785 X's. And every time it's like it's made up of 50 by, it's made up of boxes, like boxes of boxes, it's like squares with squares in them. And every time I fill up 20 squares, I cross out the whole square. And so I guess it would be satisfying for some reason to just, I need 15 more word vomits, so that's 15,000 words. I need to write 15,000 words more to be able to cross out one big block and then move down to the next layer of the next 100, the final 200 word vomits that I have to do. So I'm at 78 something percent, and I would like to cross 80%. Just, it feels good. It feels good to make progress that's visible, and to cross milestones, even though milestones are completely arbitrary. I remember there's like a graph of marathon times, and like you would expect, like just off the top of your head, you'd be like, oh, people's marathon times, yeah, it would form like a statistical distribution, right? But there are spikes at all the kind of milestone times. So like 3 hours is a lot, and then it falls a bit, and then 3.5 hours is a lot, and then 4 hours. So it's like people have goals and targets, and they try to get within them. They don't just think, I want a faster marathon time. They think, I would like to break into the 3:30 club. I would like to break into, and so on. And that is just, it's human nature, and I wouldn't try to fight it. I would prefer to work with it. I've been watching some Jordan Peterson lectures, in part because I want to. I know that he talks about things that I'm also interested in, like Jung and psychoanalysis and myths and shamanic rituals and all those things. And also, I'm just curious to understand why people feel the way they feel about him. I know that some people love him a lot. I know that some people hate him a lot, and I would like to just make my own decisions, come to my own judgments based on my own reading, right? And so so he was talking about this is in his personality lecture series. He was talking about I was just gonna get into it and I lost it. Meaning, like like just kind of what you value and how you think about the world. And he points out that so again we have this kind of science has triumphed as a system of doing things and making sense of things in the last 1,000 years or so, right? You could narrow it down to since Newton maybe, or even it just gets more and more. We when we are born and raised, we are taught about the mechanistic nature of the world, and plate tectonics, the earth is going around the sun, and there's this, and Alan Watts talks about this a lot, so it's interesting to try and synthesize and integrate these perspectives, which I guess I'm doing in real time, right? And it's just the sense of people think in terms of stories, like and this is very, very fundamental to human psychology or whatever. It's just, I don't want to get prescriptive about it. I don't want to say that this is how it is for sure and this is correct and this is wrong or whatever, but just observe the power that stories have. I think that's a thing that I was saying even before I listened to Alan Watts or Jordan Peterson. Like, just stories are very, very powerful. And if you look at children's stories, even like the little engine that could or whatever, we ascribe human characteristics and motivations and ideas to inanimate objects, right? Again, if you go back to ancient mythology, and there's like the goddess of nature, god of death, just there's all these, we personify, humanize, anthropos, and we become anthropos, whatever the word is. We project our humanity onto things and objects and ideas, and that is kind of the primary way in which we relate to things and people and each other, and the way we make sense of things is in terms of stories. And so what does that tell you? What can you learn from that? What is the implication? I think the implication is that we should, so like it makes more sense to sail with the wind rather than trying to go against it. And so in the context of project management and doing things, like it makes sense to kind of play with the narratives that you have. So this is another one of my old talking points and riffs even before I watched this stuff, which is just, there's some narrative in your head. You're always operating with narratives. There's no way, it seems vanishingly improbable or impossible for maybe they're like extreme outliers, like 0.01% of people who can operate without narratives, but the vast majority of us think in stories, ascribe narrative meaning to everything, and you make sense of your own life as a story or as a set of stories, and we tell each other stories all the time. Even casual conversation is, hey, this is what happened, and I'm so frustrated, annoyed, whatever. There's this goal that I have. I mean, you don't literally tell your friend there's this goal that I have. You might say something like, oh, I went to get myself a new iPhone, and then like the lady was this, and it really all, it's all about obstacles and what goals and trying to get there, and the challenges along the way. And I'm not trying to say that every little interaction is drenched with profound meaning, though it can be if you want it to be. And and if you go all the way too far off the edge, right? If you go off, if you go into the deep end, then that's where you get like like paranoia, delusion, sense of grandeur, like the sense that, oh, everything in the world is about me or in relation to me, and like people are listening to my conversations, and aliens are coming for me or whatever. It's just that, it's that extreme thing, and then all the way at the other end you have nothing matters, everything is random, everything's mechanical, there's no free will, everything is kind of dry, and we are a bunch of atoms. And it's I guess lots of people have something that's kind of somewhere in the middle, where you might not believe in fate or destiny. I don't think if you ask me, do I believe in fate or destiny, I don't have an answer for you. I think that's the starting point of a conversation. I would ask you, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? What do you think destiny is? What do you think you are destined to do? Based on your stories, based on your assumptions about your stories, based on your background, your childhood, where you're from, what you're doing, what your skills are, how people perceive you, all of those things kind of add up to a certain trajectory that we may have different ideas about what the trajectory would be. It could be it could be, maybe there's a range of possible trajectories, and we might disagree on the spread, on the angle, right, of like what your life trajectory might be like. And again, even the word trajectory implies an up and a down, and it's just very interesting. But wanted to talk about project management, and where am I going with this? So anyway, I have an ebook that I'm working on called Introspect, and that's part of the reason I was watching Jordan Peterson videos, was I felt that it would be slightly disingenuous / dishonest in some very narrow and specific way that most people probably won't agree with. But like I felt like it would be in some sense dishonest of me to write an ebook about introspection to an audience that I'm guessing is either familiar with Jordan Peterson and his zeitgeist, the whole Joe Rogan and that sphere of mainstream culture that I'm actually not very familiar with because I don't really keep up with the day-to-day stuff. And I felt like it would be dishonest of me to write about that without acknowledging that stuff or describing what my thoughts are in relation to those things. So in relation to Peterson's ideas, for example. I probably won't include it in version 1.0 because that would require me to do a lot of work, and I feel like I've blown past multiple self chosen deadlines. And so I feel like, I guess the insight that I feel like I have, that is what I want to make this video about, which took me 17 minutes to get to, is that it's like a version control idea, which I've talked about before, but let's just go into the details. So there's version 1.0 of Introspect, which is going to be, I've basically decided that I'm going to like lock the door of what I have currently. So I'm not going to allow in any new elements to ship this version of Introspect 1.0 of the book. And so I'm going to write everything there. And I was feeling stressed and anxious and frustrated and overwhelmed because I felt like when I say it out loud, it's going to sound stupid, but inside my head, it was freaking me out and annoying me, which is that version 1.0 is going to be imperfect and wrong, and is going to miss out on certain important details, possibly the most important details, possibly. And, well, again, I say that out loud, that's not possible, because the first thing I do when I write is ask myself what's the most important thing. So I would address that right off the bat. But I guess I was very burdened by the ideas of the things that won't be in the book, or are unlikely to make it into the book anytime soon. So for example, like, am I gonna do one chapter about Jordan Peterson, or am I gonna freaking listen to all of his lectures? I'm about 6 hours in, and there's like 20, 40, 50 hours of lectures. I'm gonna listen to all of that, process all of it, figure out what I think his thesis and ideas are, comment on what I think is useful, what I think is not useful, what I think is somewhat misguided by my assessment, right? Here's this 30-year-old guy with no clinical background, no psychotherapy background, is gonna criticize some other guy for what he has to say. But I have learned enough of Peterson's language so far to know how to engage with him, right? And I would say things like, it's in the intro to his first lecture, he talks about how the question that you want to answer that science can't help you with is just how should you conduct yourself, right? There's things that you want, there's things that you don't want, there's things that you like, things that you don't like. Like it's while there have been people who have come up with elaborate schools of thought and all of those things, you can engage with these ideas as a layperson, as a thoughtful layperson who's trying to figure stuff out and is curious and has questions. And you come up with all the questions, and then you answer all of the questions that can be answered by Googling or talking to people, and then you eventually arrive at the set of questions that don't have easy or immediate answers, and that's when you become interesting. So then I could sit down with Jordan and chat with him and be useful and interesting to him as someone who is interested in the material, right? So I got to chat with David Deutsch a while ago. I have a video on my channel, and that was kind of the approach there as well. And I believe that I believe that any genuinely curious person who's trying to make sense of things and trying to know what they know and know what other people know and what other people think, and to figure out stuff through the negotiation of that, like when you realize that, you can pretty much cold reach out to anybody on the planet. But I mean, you have to do your homework first, right? Doing your homework is proof that you're not just that you're invested in having a conversation. I feel like I'm digressing. But yeah, so okay, there's that body of work that I would like, that I could see myself doing a whole research project about Peterson's work. And it's not so much that I'm obsessed with Peterson. I could also do this about Alan Watts, and I kind of have already on Twitter. But I guess that feels more current, and if I'm being honest, I know that there's already audience for it, and I want to grow my audience because I think for a bunch of reasons, partially vanity, I'll admit, and also partially that a live audience of people who are currently interested and motivated and engaged, that's a lively scene to participate in and learn from. There's just more activity, right? When there's more activity, there's more collisions, more negotiation, more conflict that can be managed well. And yeah, so I'm gonna process that information, but and maybe that might restructure the whole of my body of work for introspect. But so that would have to be version 1.1 or maybe 1.2. And I guess that's what I'm getting at about project management, which is the importance of periodically locking the doors and deciding that whatever you there's this quote that's like, you go to war with the army you have, not the army you wish you had, right? And yet you always want to be, in the long run, you always want to be building the army that you wish you had, right? So there is that trade-off there. There's that cycle between doing what's in front of your face, and there's a limited amount of time that you have, limited amount of energy that you have to do what you can do, and then there's the potential that you want to build up towards. And yeah, I guess the other big thing I want to think about out loud about project management is the sense that I feel all the time that I have these very grand projects that I want to work on. And when I say grand, I don't even mean like of glorious purpose. I mean grand in terms of scale and scope relative to what I can do in a single day. So, for example, let's talk about cleaning out my notes. My Twitter bio has been Visa is cleaning out its notes for a couple of weeks now. And that's an infinite game. Like I haven't, technically it's a finite set of notes, but it feels infinite because every day I could spend, I could theoretically spend like 8 hours just going through my notes, and then it feels like some progress is made, but then I kind of step back and look at my body of work, and it's just so big. There's just so much stuff that it feels infinite. And it's the same for my word vomit writing project. I'm rereading my word vomits. I'm currently, I think, at about 305 out of almost 800. And I'm reading and taking notes, and I'm like, by the time it feels like forever, but actually now that I say it out loud, I'm at 300 out of 800. So I'm about 35 to 40% done. 40%, some amount done, almost halfway done, right? When I get to 400, I'll be halfway done. And it's just, I guess I want to talk out loud about how that feels. Progress on a large project can feel like you're not making progress at all. And so that's very important. It's very, as I say this out loud, it's becoming clear to me, to myself, that I should be signposting my progress on my large projects a lot more for my own sanity and my own sense of progress, because you get emotions from, so like with when you if let's say you run a 5 hour marathon and you want to run a 4 hour marathon, or just whatever version of that, like when you set milestones along the way, so let's say you want to do 4 hours and 4.5 hours before you do four. Crossing 4.5 hours can feel really good if you decide that that's a goal that you want to cross. And then when you cross and you feel really good, it's emotions, right? It's energy. It's you change your identity. There's so many benefits to that, and it feels like in the sphere of people who talk about things kind of in a mechanistic and procedural way, they underestimate the value of milestones. And I think that was true even amongst my colleagues at my last company, who I all enjoyed very much. Very, very smart people, very analytical, very thoughtful. They taught me a lot about how to think, how to proceduralize things. It was a very clinical in a good way, right? Like surgical, like very effective stuff. But we didn't celebrate. We did have celebrations, but like if I ran a company myself, the DNA of the company would have a lot more celebration in it. And that's not, I'm not saying that that's good or bad. That's a reflection of my personality, right? And I feel that I need to celebrate things in order to make progress. And so that brings you to a pretty crazy thought, which is that, so I usually don't celebrate. I historically, I didn't celebrate things much, because no matter how much progress I made, I was always aware of how much more there is to go, right? Like, let's say you're in debt and then you cross the milestone in being less in debt. Should you celebrate? Like, then that takes you a little, like, celebrating, if you go out for dinner, that puts you a bit more in debt, right? So let's say your debt's $10,000 in debt, right? And then you go down to $5,000 in debt. How much should you spend on a dinner celebrating that? It's a good question. How much should you celebrate? How much should I would say, like $100, $200 even is like so instinctively I would think so I normally eat dinners that's like $5 to $10 Singapore dollars, and when I want to have a really nice dinner, which I did for the first time on my own when I launched my ebook Friendly Ambitious Nerd, and I went out and so that's whack. My camera just ran out of memory on the memory card, and I freaked out, and I'm still recording my audio. Anyway, I was talking about celebrations, and me and my wife, and I brought her out for dinner. So we spent like $100. I mean, like $50 per person, or like 40 something bucks per person, which is like 3 to 4 times more than I usually spend on a meal. Or just it was a celebration, and it was pretty. It felt good, and that's the thing that I'm trying to train myself in, which is, I used to think that celebrating progress is well, again, like it's interesting to examine, because I would encourage other people to celebrate their progress all the time. It's obviously the right thing to do when I'm talking about other people, but when I'm talking about myself, I guess I feel guilty, or I feel ashamed in some way that, sure, I've made like 25% progress, but there's so much more to go, and there's so much still undone, and there's so much that's wrong, and but yeah, I'm retraining myself to partition my projects. Well, to partition my projects such that I have celebrations along the way. And I get that, I'm reminded of like, I think there's this meme from way back. I don't know if they would call it a meme, but like study advice that says, when you study like one page, like eat one gummy bear, and that's like progress. And I'm like, I can't do that. Why would I do that? I'll just eat all the gummy bears, right? And maybe that's something that at that scale, it could be a thing about scale, that it doesn't make sense at that scale. But I think that going out and having a nice dinner, like that's fancier than you normally do, I think that creates a sense of occasion. And I know that David Ogilvy talked about the importance of having a sense of occasion in the restaurant that he used to work at, the kitchen, when he was a chef, and how he brought that to his organization. So I think that's the thing that I want to take away from and remember, which is that I need to introduce more of a sense of occasion in my life, because at some level I feel like I'm supposed to suffer, supposed to work in the trenches, going through my notes, grueling, like live in a cave, in a dungeon, going through my notes and all that stuff. and that's not necessary, right? I need to, and I have made some progress in some ways. Like I have this Twitter thread that I'll post in the comments. That every month I try and celebrate all of the things that I did that month. Like, and the celebration in this case is literally just posting it as a tweet. Like this was what this month. This was what this month was, and yeah, I want to make it more of a practice to partition my big projects into measurable, manageable chunks and celebrate getting those chunks done. And yeah, again, I this once I say it, it seems obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me, and so maybe it wasn't obvious to you. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your experiences are. Let's chat in the comments. Done.